never thought of you like that.
Hello, good morning, and many thanks indeed for joining us here on Morning Prime. This is the 24th of May 2023, and of course our guests are already here with us. It's Wednesday. Every Wednesday we have Global Today coming your way, where we interrogate matters of foreign policy, diplomacy and security, and of course looking at what is happening here in the country as far as the political landscape is concerned and how that affects our security as well. The African Union will be celebrating their 60th anniversary tomorrow, and we'll be also updating you on that as well. And we'll be joining momentarily or later also with the former Deputy Chair of African Union, who is away, that is Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, and we shall be looking at some of the milestones since we had the Organization of African Union that moved to African Union, and what they're celebrating. The hashtag is Our Africa, Our Future. What has it played so far, and how has it been very pivotal in stabilizing Africa when it comes to matters of security, matters of climate change, and a raft of other issues as well. That commemoration will be tomorrow, and this month has been the African Month, where we look at how the affairs of Africa has been panning out. Also, Ethiopia security protesters also they're back in the streets demanding withdrawal of outside forces. That is in Ethiopia. South Africa is looking at options to avoid Vladimir Putin arrest warrant. And we know also, at the same time in Russia, we have Vladimir Putin, who's putting the prosecutor of ICC, that is Karim Khan, on the wanted list in Russia. And this is deeply concerning ICC, that decision to put the prosecutor on the wanted list. And also we shall be looking at what is happening within the football fraternity as well, where there was a very contentious issue on Sunday in the La Liga, where the Spanish football is admitting racism a problem after Vinicius' incident. We shall be discussing that as well, and how also that is panning out in the sport arena as well. US and China chip wars is on, and how is it going to affect the world's economy? That is very pivotal, and Taiwan has been the center of attraction of this particular war. And why Taiwan? We saw US, the former Speaker of the Congress, going there, and this was sparking a lot of debates as well in the US and the China fracas that has been happening, so to speak, regarding that particular visit. But what does it portend? I have my guest with us this morning. We are holding court with Professor Peter Kagwanja, who is the CEO of Africa Policy Institute, also Ahmed Ashi, Governance and Policy Analyst. We have Professor Noami Demba, who is a foreign policy and defense expert, also senior partner with Glossip. Also, we have a man who has been on a sabbatical leave.
Too long.
This is Dr. Mustafa Ali. Right, he's not been this other side of the tracks, and we want just to welcome him back. Is this where now we pop the champagne early in the morning? Do we pop champagne early in the morning?
You can pop coffee or tea.
Will it pop? Will it freeze?
No,
That's the question.
It doesn't. You can toast at
You
least.
can toast in the morning. Dr. Mustafa, good to see you.
Good to see you and colleagues again after about a year.
Yeah, you can give us highlights where we've been, how many countries you've visited, how many kings have you also held court with as well?
No, Dibal, you know, my work is with children and for children. So when while I was away, that is what I was doing. We trying to build a better future for children, a better world for the future of children. Next year, the UN is going to hold what is going to succeed the SDG. Is going to host what Guterres is saying the summit of the future. That summit it is going to be the next United Nations General Assembly major theme, and all the heads of states will be discussing that. That summit, if there will be no children in that summit, if they're not going to listen to what the children, the world, the children and young people want to see, then it's going to be a waste of time. So we're putting all our focus and efforts to ensure that that summit is going to incorporate what the young people want to see for the future. the current crop of leadership around the world is literally failing. Where we are today, Professor Kagwanja is saying almost getting to the fully fledged Third World War. It is a massive failure of the leadership that is there today. And what kind of a world are we going to bequeath our children and young generations? This is something that we have to think about, and this is what I've been doing. Yes,
I did. Also, I know you wear different hats as well. You can brief us, because this month there was an interparliamentarians panel on freedom of religion and beliefs as well. You are in that particular space, especially with under the ambit of the United Nations. I know you are one of the Secretary Generals. I don't know, you can remind us.
I'm a member of the UN Multi-Faith Advisory Council.
Yes, Multi-Faith Advisory Council.
Yes.
And how that pivotal is looking at faith and what is happening right now, the issue to do with the Shakahola, and different just faiths in the world where there's a freedom of religion that is still under threat, not with the case here in the country, but just generally in the world.
Yeah,
I don't know what is happening in that particular space also.
No, globally and in very specific countries, freedoms of religion and belief are under attack and risk of being pushed back. I was in New Delhi 2 weeks ago, and India is going to host the G20 summit this year, and what now India is working on, because of the issues that have really come up out of India, is how the issue of the freedom of belief and religion is going to be focused on, besides many other agendas that are there. Here in Kenya, I can see that the freedom of belief and religion is being extended in the opposite direction, to the extent that it is being abused by people who claim to be people of cloth. And freedoms are not, these freedoms are not absolute. The moment you start engaging in or pushing people in places where you are now becoming an affront to their own freedoms, to what now we've seen in Shakahola, that is no longer, it's criminal. And that is something, of course, the government really, there's been a kind of a systemic failure in this regard. And these things were known. You know, people like Mackenzie, arrested several times, taken to court, released several times, and we shouldn't really be crying a lot. I think all of us should take responsibility for what has happened in Shakahola. 250 plus people dead so far and counting is not a small matter. And all these people that have died, including young people and children, have died because everybody is assuming that they have freedoms, a cloth in religion and belief, and taking people to death in such gruesome manner. I think we have to revisit this. And this issue of, I have to say this, regulation, there is no day religions are going to regulate themselves. The government has to come in. I hear people, including politicians and leaders, talking about self-regulation of religion. I don't think they are going to regulate themselves. If the government is not going to step in, Shakahola is going to happen again and again and again and again. There must be a no-nonsense attitude, like the one that Kagame has in Rwanda. You know, you don't just go and register a church or a mosque or a madrasa and start doing what you do, because there's money there. And Africans are generally, when they become religious, they become notoriously religious. And so the government has to come in and address this issue.
Right, I think it's Professor Mbithi who says that Africans are notoriously religious. Correct. Just quoting what Mustafa is saying. Well, let me just hear from Professor Peter Kagwanja. He's been also flying off the radar a bit. He can tell us where he has been, what he has learned, and what he's brought back on the table this morning.
Thank you, Dibal. I'm glad to be back in this forum. Also glad to see my friend Mustafa Ali and the Jadung there, and my in-law here.
Jadong is not wearing his fedora cap this morning.
He's still donning his bow tie.
Yes.
There was a man called Kimani Wanyoike, and another one called Gengi Muigai. They had it as their signature political, symbols.
And there was one coming from Western Province.
That is
Martin Shikuku.
Called Martin Shikuku.
The People's Watchman.
The Martin Shikuku.
Those were the days when bow tie really ruled the country. Thank you, Dibala. I've been to a few other places, but I spent about 10 or so days in China, different places. And it was very exciting because I've written about this. I went on what you can call patriotic, patriotic sites, tourism. And China has perfected that very, very well, where they have literally mapped each and every aspect of their history and turned it into, a school for their young, so that young Chinese are literally walking into these halls and getting education about their past. So history is literally taught in a very feasible manner and in a very beautiful manner. Some of the sites are extremely beautiful. You want to take photos and photos about them. I went to one place called Shibaipo. Shibaipo is where Chairman Mao Zedong left in order to go to Beijing now to become the leader of China after victory. It was the last place, his last fort. You walk through where he was sleeping, where his family was, in a small 10 by 10 room, and so on. But I think as you enter that particular memorial, they call it Shijaipo Memorial in Hubei province, you feel the way China respects its past and its people. And now reflecting that with the experience that we have had with Mokami Kimathi and other, Koitareosa Arab Samoei, you go to the lady in Mombasa, the coast, Mekiteriri, Wamenza, you go to, the Somali Jurans, who had empires and all, we we have rich history, extremely rich tapestry of our culture and history that we can create. But the most interesting thing is not just the history itself, but the income, because people are paying to go there. Some are villages that were very poor, and they have now become modernized. And you want to see, how this has happened. And their leaders identify with that history. So that's what I was up to last month. I attended 2 conferences at the same time on what we call dialogue of civilizations. Basically, a direct answer to Samuel Huntington's crash of civilizations. We don't need to have a crash of civilization. We want a dialogue of civilization. We are different. We are different cultures. God created us differently. But we live in one world. So we need to talk. And there is no alternative to talking. So those were part of the things that I witnessed. But at the same time, I was leading home, and I'm interested with the comment that Dr. Mustafa made about religion and the governing of the religious space. It is not regulation. We need to use the Rajah, but it's governing. And there is no space on planet Earth, whether we are talking about forests,
Correct,
or we are talking the oceans. We are now talking about the blue economies. We are literally extending governance to all places. There should never be ungoverned spaces, whether they are conceptual or physical.
correct.
All spaces must be governed. That's one. 2, I think we need to distinguish between faith and criminality. Mustafa has made his career, as many of us have done, on studying violent extremism related to faith.
Correct.
And this is the faith called Islam. We have not yet started studying violent extremism relating to other faiths,
Correct.
particularly Christianity,
Correct.
in this region. And I dare say that it is beginning to become the most extremist faith. But beyond that, we are beginning to get the gruesome criminality that you can never witness. I argue, and I would like somebody to dispute this, that what we are finding in Shakahora and other places is not literally, these are not deaths. This is a syndicate of organ trade.
Correct.
Investigate that. So it's organ trade. Now, if you go to...
Well, it's not been really established as yet. This is still under investigation.
But let's get the bodies and be told that they have the organs, the vital organs. We, in this country, there are people sitting around the table and making requests. And can I have an 18-year-old to 25-year-old run or river? The people have beginning to have those gruesome conversations around the coffee tables and other places. What kind of a country are we building here? When you can have those kind of, you are an entrepreneur of organs. No, we need to call a spade a spade. I know we have not gotten evidence. I know we are still investigating. But as scholars, you can forgive us. We start with hypothesis. And then go to thesis. That's us. We start with hypothesis. And that's our profession. That's how we were trained, my brother. So Shakahora cannot be the way to heaven.
Yeah.
It is basically a very lucrative trade in this. You go to Sinai, go to between Egypt and Israel. There is that Sinai desert where the Israelis once upon a time were in what they call the antechamber. You know, the in-between home and slavery. In that antechamber today is a lucrative business in organs. People hunting organs. I mean, Eritreans will tell you those stories.
Yes,
they are all over.
I've been to Sinai.
Yes.
I've been to Sinai. This about what Professor is saying. Religion is just used as a cover.
Yes.
Actually, when the report finally comes out of what has happened in Shakahola, Kenyans are going to be shocked. And there's a research that has been done on cults in this country. When that is also going to be launched, Kenyans are going to be shocked at the number of cults we have in this country, and that nothing is being done to stop these cults.
Mustafa, is
Right.
this report going to be the kind of report we expect? Or is it going to be a tainted report that has nothing?
I hope it's not going to be tainted. There are two commissions that have been, there's a judicial commission and a task force. I mean, if really whoever is serving on those, the judicial commission and task force is going to do what they're supposed to do, they should not mask anything about Shakahola, because those reports should be the basis of which now we go back, not to do some kind of introspection, but upon which then we act on the recommendations from those reports.
Indeed. Let's hear from Hashi, because when you talk about that judicial commission of inquiry, that has been also scuppered by the courts right now. It has been stopped by the...
I advised the government to call a judicial here, right here on this show. And the next day they did. Tells you that the panel is helping this country. I want to criticize Raila Odinga and his Azimio band for sending Mr. Mwangi to court to contest the commission. I think that these men and women should be let to do their job. And we should not politicize every fish and chip in this country. And I completely disagree with the political party that everybody knows I have huge sympathy for. But I can tell you that this is absolutely the wrong move. I think that it's just fighting with your nails. We have the steak and potatoes political fights out there, which is healthy for this country. We're a democratic government, democratic state, democratic society. And I think that as Azimio people are reaching for the straw, because this is not a political party issue. This is not. And I think that the president also made a huge mistake on his inaugural day of talking about this. He should have called on the entire leadership of this country, so that this whole country could see the leadership of this country saying no to this, what has been aptly been called a gruesome canvas. Now, if the panel, if the judicial inquiry I think it's led by the Honorable Justice Letich. I believe that's the lady, Lady Justice Letich. I think that if that commission plays around even a little bit with what is happening, what happened there, that will mean there's no government in this country. It will mean that it's a free-for-all, and anybody can do anything, and the basic rule of government is law and order. And if the government of this country cannot maintain law and order in this country, then it is the writ of the government will expire. We might as well call for a new general election. That commission of inquiry cannot be the business as usual commission. It must tell this country what has happened there, and it must be a game changer when it comes to these issues of millenarianism in this country. And Debal, you know, of course, that these things are created by the economy, which, you know, I said when this new government was coming in, I said three things. I said he's a one-term president, he's going to ruin the economy, and he's not going to bring people together. And that is driving at 150 kilometers an hour on the fast lane towards that objective. That's my view. And I find that, but on the matters of Shakahola, I think it will be a disaster for this government to go and change the text so that the country does not know what really happened. The judge who was there, Malindi or Kilifi, let that man go. You remember he was rearrested outside the court again. Yes. It brings the whole, you know, corruption, you know, in this country started at the judiciary. The first day that the corruption started, the former President Jomo Kenyatta and the Minister for Home Affairs, both of them late, so the first and second president, the Home Affairs Minister, that was the place where the prisons, the correction, and the judiciaries were housed. And they had their counterpart in the Attorney General. That's how we had a one-party state in this country. So we have to protect the gains of our democratic movements in this country. And we cannot allow authoritarianism now to come through the back door. And I put it to you about that the test for this government is not going to be even, I think, the economy. I think it's going to be how it deals with this Shakahola. Because we already know that the economy is in the outhouse, to use a European word. Lastly, well, you know, I'm famous for being blunt. And I think it has never been good to me. But nevertheless, Debal, I think it is very important that all of us are patriotic about this country. And the best way to be patriotic about this country is to stand up and tell the truth just the way it is.
All right. Maybe we can go back to the politics of the day. Today, technology is failing me, so I think my network is down. I cannot really beam those dailies as well. But you can get a glimpse of what is on the front page of a Standard, and just to maybe prime our viewers as well on what is happening on this as well. Noami Dama, you wanted to mention something. I thought you had actually chimed in.
No.
Okay. I can see Hashi pointing at you, and so I thought maybe I've missed out something.
Yeah, but the ball from Mustafa to Kanenje to not Kanenje.
Hashi. Kanenje is much more handsome than I am.
Okay.
He's shorter.
My daughter said they're girls who are looking after her.
Bana.
You announce in public that you're a masharia. a man looking for.
Yeah.
No, I'm single, but...
Masharia. Masharia is one who is looking for something.
Oh.
So you announced yourself.
Can Noami Dama just finish his train of thought?
The BAL have been teaching 3 graduate classes at Cavendish University in Uganda. They're students from 14 countries around Africa. These are diplomats, military people, Navy, police, they're together. And the BAL, on the weekend, I had the student, what you call the student presentation, defending their work. And the Major General, Kavimbi, who is in charge of the President Office in Uganda, has stated very clearly that we cannot move any further. He has seen it, he understands it. He's not a young man. But chaos, corruption, and disorder in Africa cannot move anywhere because we are not willing to do something about it. The only person who has stepped forward and doing something about it is Paul Kagame. And nobody is giving Paul Kagame credit. And so on the street too, we have disorder, where the bikers ride whichever way they want, Matatu goes whichever way they want. And then the corruption that is now circling around our so-called churches. And what are people to believe in? How can people look forward? Winston Churchill talked about blood, toil, tears, and sweat. That's what about management of our government. Barack Obama talked, yes, we can. And people believe in it. When is the point where we're going to put our foot forward and say no more? Because the new anti-corruption guy talk about police, our police system as the most corrupt agency, followed by Department of Health. Then how can we sit here and believe that things are going to be done on behalf of the country? These are the major national questions that we need to deal with.
You did. Thank you, Professor Naomi Damba. So just to look at the dailies, just briefly to chime in, most of them are talking about what is happening with the Jubilee Party. We can try and analyze it from the security perspective of it as well, and what it does really portend, this particular chasm that is widening, an implosion within Jubilee, and a game of Uhuru Party's brutal battle. And there's a Tower of Babel there. It says that Jubilee was turning nasty, and Uhuru Kenyatta has jumped right in the middle. What happens if his faction wins or loses? And why is it a fight to the wire for the former head of state? And that is a story that is tucked away on page 4 and 5 of the Standard this morning. Daily Nation is asking a probing question as the headline. It's been editorialized here. Who owns Jubilee? President Ruto recognizes Sabina Chege as my fellow party leader. It says Azimio's Odinga warns him to keep off his camp. And there is confusion galore, it says there. On Monday, former President Kenyatta's camp seemed to have finally had its way in the long-running battle for control of Jubilee. But all that changed yesterday in a day of many twists as the party's registrar and dispute tribunal weighed in on the beat around, albeit conflictingly, it says, throwing party's leadership and identity of its real officials up in the air. And this story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. And Uhuru on the verge of losing Jubilee's party following that particular determination yesterday from the tribunal. That is the latest developments so far, looking at the dailies. And the People Daily has it that it says MPs, that is Kenya Kwanza MPs, have been wooed to pass the tax bill. That is also what is on the front page of the People Daily this morning. Just want to rope in Professor Kagwanja. With this latest development so far and the Jubilee implosion, I think that is your party as well. You were running for Senate in Murang'a under the flag of Jubilee.
Yes,
But you missed also the National Delegates Conference.
I was also part of the intellectuals who founded not Jubilee but its predecessors, from TNA to Jubilee Coalition, and even before URP. So the history is very clear. But let me say this: that I think supreme in this country is the law, the Constitution. And it is not just a question of understanding, reading the Constitution like a book, the way, because we can have it anywhere, we have it here. It's about understanding what Baron Montesquieu called the spirit of the law, and where the country is coming from and where it is going. My fear is that what is happening in Jubilee is just an indication of how we are going backward in terms of the gains we had made in our democratic process from a spirit of the law perspective. And I'm saying this because I'm sure, Uhuru Kenyatta or his people are listening to me. And that they would want to see what this rebel is saying. I'm not a rebel. We came to this country, back to this country, because we had failed to agree. And therefore we went to war. And it took external people to come and mediate between us and to bring sanity back to our country. And when sanity came back, we all agreed that we're going to have a kind of a constitution that is going to supersede the constitution we had been left by Elizabeth II. And therefore we had our own constitution. And what is at the heart of that constitution? At the heart of that constitution is a continuity. Two governments, one in power, one in waiting. We called the one in power the executive. We called the other the opposition. And both are in the constitution and in our parliament. And they have, the problem we have is the strength of the opposition within that law. And we would like to strengthen the opposition to be that government in waiting. That's one. Two, we created a position of a post-presidency. Post-presidency is that every president who retires enters into the next phase. And it is very, very well defined by the presidential, the act that is defining the time of the president who has left office. And it is simply that you are simply an advisor to the sitting president. That's the position. And two, that you be called upon to assist the country in whichever way. Now, when you begin to look at South Africa, and you look at Tanzania or Senegal, you begin to see or America for that matter, you begin to see what role the post-presidency plays. It is simply the sobering voice. You'll never have external people coming to encroach on your sovereignty and dignity as a country because you have an institution that is bestowed to do that. Only the former president can call the political elite and call them to order, to remind them that this country is greater than all of us. Those who are ruling, those who have ruled, and those who rule. And that therefore, what we have begun, the debacle we are beginning to witness in Jubilee is hitting at the core of that. It's not about who becomes the chief of Jubilee or who wins or who does not win in Jubilee. Yes. I know Raila Odinga has his own view. His own view is to maintain Jubilee as part of the Azimio coalition, continue to get the support of President Uhuru Kenyatta so that 2027 will be an easier game for him. So these are localized, short-term games of politics. But what we are losing as a country is simply the spirit of our law. And that law is now, to find the president going deep into this kind of a mess. That's why I did not take part in this whole thing, because I don't believe in it. Because this is a facade. I don't believe in what Sabina is doing, the coup, but I also don't believe in what Uhuru is doing to try and gain the coup. The people around Uhuru, and I tweeted this, are not interested with the party. For them, the party is a money minting machine. Jubilee got the largest amount of money when it had 170 members of parliament, the largest party in the East African. You can imagine the amount of money they got from the political parties. And this is money that you are just supposed to spend on politics. Now they have 28, they expect some money. So for them, it's a loss. These are die-in-the-wool capitalists who think of parties as money minting machines. But for us, if you look at what is happening in America, the Democratic Party and Republican Party, you look at what is happening in China, in the Chinese Communist Party, you look at what is happening in India with their main parties, the party is the soul of the nation. The debacle in Jubilee signifies the failure of this country because it is the party that produces the government. If you remember in the 60s and 70s, Jatero, we used to say, "Oh, Kanu yajenga nchi." It is the party that builds the nation. It is not the state house that builds the nation. The moment state house builds the nation, we have dictatorship. Call it that. Right. And there is no other name to it. If power comes from state house, we have a dictatorship. If power comes from the party, we have a democracy. So what Uhuru and his team are doing, they are dramatizing the chaos in our society. We need to call ourselves to order. We have no alternative. We need to call Uhuru to order. Get out of politics. Be the statesman that you are. Allow the rest, even if it's relatives or whoever else is, allow the others to have a say in the day, a day in the say. Because what does victory look like for a former president who cannot get back to power? What does victory look like in this particular game?
So you're essentially saying that for you to be a statesman, you don't have to be necessarily embroiled in politics.
Yes, like...
So for me to be a statesman, I have to be apolitical.
Even to be in public. For example, many of us have not held any official position for over a decade. We've never. But we're building our nation from where we are, in our universities, in our think tanks, in the media. We're doing our part and we're happy about it. We wake up early. 6 o'clock, we are seated. 5 o'clock, we are seated. We wake up early. So what is the point? The point is, Uhuru Kenyatta will continue to be very powerful as a leader, with ruling now not from the constitutional power, but the moral power of the country. And moral power is basically what brings people to order. What was the Secretary General Kofi Annan brought into this country was not the constitutional power or anything. Mm-hmm. He governed us with the Mukapa, with the moral power, until we came back to our senses. So this is what we are saying. But so I cannot see why we should fight, or Uhuru should fight for Jubilee as a party. At the same time, I don't agree with the idea of vandalizing a political party. So also the ruling party, Kenya Kwanza, should not make it a game because you are going for either for Kenyatta or you are going for Ruto. Remember, we have the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law is that we have two governments. Even if it will be one Jubilee person standing, it will be the opposition, by law protected. So you cannot vandalize a political party, for example, and you sponsor this and this and that. So again, we need to call the government also to order. And calling the government to order is to allow Jubilee to be where it is. If Jubilee chose to be in Azimio, let Jubilee be in Azimio. That does not mean that the president cannot use Jubilee for his vote, because what is robbing about? Robbing to have the support of Parliament means that you go across the board. When you want to have a major vote passed in the United States Congress, you reach out for both Democrats and Republicans, and you get your vote. That's what democracy is about. Yeah. So the government has the power now to lobby Jubilee, the 28 members of Parliament, to support it without having them to cross the floor and become part of Kenya Kwanza. So again, it is the practice of our democracy which is becoming messy, both on the side of the government. But for me, the worst part is where the institution of the post-presidency is now dying, because we created it in the constitution in Naivasha deliberately, because we did not want Kofi Annan back in the country.
Right, the constitution does not start with we, the government.
No.
It starts with we, the people. If it started with we, the government, we'd be in a lot of trouble. So the government ought to stop attacking President Uhuru Kenyatta's sheep, attacking his farm.
Yeah.
Getting a nervous condition on stage about Mr. Kenyatta every day. We are Mr. Kenyatta, we are Mr. Kenyatta. The government has a very big job called the economy. Well, you know about the economy, Debal. We don't have an economy. It's a kaput, to use a German word. This nervous condition over the former president brought him out of retirement to defend himself. Because from day one at the inauguration, Mr. Koganja and I are the ones who called on President Kenyatta to go and attend that thing, and he was not going to go because he knew that was what was going to happen. But as leaders, thought leaders and public intellectuals in this country, we said for power to be transferred from one group to the other person who's transferring power has to be there and has to hand over power, and the country has to see that. And he did. It was a very tough thing for him to do, and it's not required in the law. but it's required in the spirit of the law. So, Debal, I think that it's the government that brought the Jubilee back into it, and they attacked his party. They attacked his party very viciously. And I think that is the government, what shows you that the president and his deputy, and particularly his both him, but particularly his deputy, had an axe to grind. And my advice for them on the first week was to be magnanimous, to shake hands and walk away from the past. Don't forget it. Forgive it and walk away. But they chose the opposite direction of vindictiveness. And that has now created a much more sterner opposition. And it now seems that the strategy of the opposition is to walk around, is to put Mr. Uhuru on TV, and the entire government goes crazy. So I suggest that the government needs to tackle our tax issues, needs to tackle our economy, needs to tackle our law and order. It's failing on all the fronts in which a government needs to be passing. And once it does that, then it will have the moral wit of the people. Walt Whitman used to say, you know, a government is like diapers. It needs to be changed every 5 years. You know, we have to change it because, you know, so we changed the last one, right? And we've got a new diaper on. Now, if they continue doing what they do, then this diaper will be changed faster than it's supposed to be. So I really put it to you, Mr. Debal, that it's very important for us to get our priorities right. And the priority number one is to leave these political parties alone. Now, let me remind you of a few things about the history of this country. Because, Debal, as you know, with our esteemed colleagues, we're on the reading list of many of the universities now. We are required watching, not required reading. So I put it to you, Debal, that if you look at the history of this country, when Jomo Kenyatta and Tom Mboya came to power, the KADU, which was led by the late Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, crossed the floor and joined the government. And there was no opposition in Kenya. That is where that song came from. Kanu ya Jenga Ichi. A song that my senior learned has just said. And what happened after that? Jaramogi Odinga went and tested the political parties law and formed something called the KPU. And Debal, you're very aware of what happened to the KPU. They were all in police stations in Kamiti. The president is creating a one-party state by getting a massive amount of MPs just the other day. He is looking to crush all the opposition parties in this country. And when he crushes that political party, do you know what happens next? It's authoritarianism. But you see, the problem is that this is not 1960. This is 2023. Even in Nandi County, they will rebel. Forget about Kisumu. Even in Nandi, in Eldoret, there will be massive protests if he tries to play with that. Because you know what? The counties are on stake. The new constitution is on stake. Every progressive issue in this country is on stake. And Debal, I'm just speaking from the historical record. Mr. Ruto opposed all those things. Not one did he support. He did not rally for the new constitution. He never supported the counties. He never supported all these issues that we progressive Kenyans have always fought for. And Kenya, being the conservative country that it is, handed him an election, even though a lot of us believe that the election goodies are now being handed over to the chairperson of Mary Chebukati. Has been appointed to a commission, which is something that should never happen in this country. A relative of the person who was in the electoral commission should never be given a political appointment in this country.
Right. Dr. Mustafa, briefly.
Yeah, Debal, what we are seeing in Kenya's politics is not new. It's something that has been going on for, you know, it's what we saw after the other elections and after the other elections in 2013, 2007. I cannot even remember which political party came to power in 2007. Which one was it?
It was
what was PNU? Yeah, PNU.
It was a coalition.
I mean,
coalition
that we were there, and you have to think what was the political party that came to power. This doesn't happen in decent states. Tanzania, you will know if it's CCM. It's always been CCM. or maybe in future Chadema or another party. There's continuity. In South Africa, you will know whether it's ANC or another political party. It's SWAPO in Namibia. It is the Democrats or Republicans in the United States. It's Labour or Conservatives in the United Kingdom. What we see in Kenya here, and it's exactly what Professor Kagwanja said, he used the word vandals. I mean, Kenya suffers political vandalism. And the politicians are vandalizing their parties and are, in effect, vandalizing the country. That soul, Professor Kagwanja spoke of the party as the soul of the country. Look at China. Even though it still calls itself a developing party, developing country, but look at what the Communist Party, you may disagree or agree with the principles of that particular party, but look at what the consistency with which it is actually building China very concretely. And so these political vandals, and we see them running around, are going to destroy this country. Parties in Kenya are personalized. They are not supposed to last for long, and this is why it's only the rich that can establish and own political parties and then control power. This has to stop if this country is going to move forward. Tanzania is going to overtake Kenya in a few years' time, economically.
I agree.
And it's not because Kenyans work very hard. But Tanzania is going to do so because they have the macros, including the political macros, are good, properly done, and there is respect for political parties. Here, politicians don't respect. Even the political parties that they actually establish, they don't respect. And it's about friendship. It's not about it's not about the country. And this is where we really go wrong as a country. If we are not going to institutionalize party politics, and the current constitution actually institutionalizes the whole concept of political party, I think we need to be doing a lot better than we are doing. And politicians are failing the country once again.
Indeed. Finally, with the Jubilee, so that we can gravitate now to other issues, especially globally.
One has to ask a question, which is, why are people running for political office in the country? And you know, Dubai, if it's like, say, UK, you are a member of parliament, they know how much asset that you have before you come, and they know how much you have before you leave. In America, the same thing happened. But here, Dubai, a guy come from the village barefoot, cannot even afford to go in border. And the next thing you know, by the time they leave, they're driving a V8 cars bigger than Kagwanja, and a lot of money in the bank somewhere. So the issue is, Dubai, KANU was the party that brought independence in this country. KANU, Dubai, at the end, was taken over by President Moi. Became like a property. If they don't want you, they kick you out. If they want you, you are inside. And then all these other political parties that are coming to the ball are more than we can chew. And the question is, what are their purpose? They're personal, the creating parties to go in and take whatever they can. And so the issue for me is the only president that really stay out of politics in Kenya since independence is Kibaki. First founding president died in office. Moi never left politics until he died. Uhuru is young enough to continue active in politics, but in a different way. You need to be a wise man. You need to be a statesman. You need to be African spokesperson, like he has done very well.
But don't you think?
And it is an institution. President is an institution. President is not Sabina Chege. You know, she has not created anything for us to say, hey, you know, this is the person we need to respect for the role he has played. Uhuru has been president twice in the country and has to be respected on the role that is played as former president. Soon, Ruto will be out of office and he will continue playing a different role. And he has to be respected like president. This is what happened in America. The only one in our time in America which went out of show is Trump. The rest are active in politics in their own way in order to create the continuity that Kagwanja talked about. So Kenyans need to understand this. Kenya should not be widow.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. And in fact, I wanted to pick up on what Professor had said earlier, if we may just go back to Matters Academia, because he's been teaching in Uganda. And lately, we've seen these bugbears and fears in Uganda regarding their degrees. And they're saying that, in fact, when you look at today's Daily Monitor, they're saying how expired degrees have broken dreams. It says that the revelation of expired programs being taught at Ugandan universities have brought to the fore painful testimonies from career-driven professionals whose hopes of acquiring premium education at Western institutions crumble like a pack of cards. But no one listened to the parliament. No one listened to them. Parliament has now jumped in and dominated that and demanded that the government acts. It's not very clear here. But it just brings you to the question about our degrees and how sometimes they don't really look at the curriculum as well, especially in Uganda, as it is, because the Western institutions are rejecting their degrees. You're teaching there. How is that affecting you?
Dubal is not only Uganda alone. When the British left, they left.
Let's focus on Uganda for
No, it
because
is
of time.
important to understand, because what's happening in Uganda is also happening in Kenya. There are people here in parliament with masters, and some of them are calling themselves doctors, who had not gone through primary school, as far as I'm concerned, here in Kenya. So what is happening is the British left a system where University of Nairobi was supposed to provide engineering, isn't it?
Correct.
Kampala, Makerere, was supposed to provide medicine. Dar es Salaam was supposed to provide law. Highest, what we call signature program, what we call center that we are proud about. And so what has happened is that every imaginable people created their own university. And you can come, I've been approached as a vice chancellor by very senior people in the government now, which say, Prof, can I get this MBA in 8 months? And I rejected that as a vice chancellor because I didn't get my degree in 8 months. And so then they leave this institution and go somewhere else. The next thing you know, the ball is this person has MBA. How? So what is happening in Uganda is a macro compost of the entire system in East Africa and beyond, including Nigeria. And Ugandans are beginning to say, wait a minute.
Thank you.
What is happening?
All right, briefly,
this is the issue.
Professor Kagwanja, this before we take a short break, briefly.
Now, let me say that
2 minutes.
Yeah, personally, I teach at the University of Nairobi. Mustafa and I are in the same department where we co-teach. We are supervising our students. And before we came here, we had a small meeting on one of our students we are supervising. So the university provides the curriculum. The professors teach. Senate approved degrees. So the university is a very well established system. And when you hear degrees are failing, it's a failure of the entire system rather than anything else. I'm teaching a course as a science, technology, and international relations at the PhD level. I have 18 students. who have taken the course.
That's
So
a big load.
they will be examined this Friday. Now we have gone out of our way. We had the same seminar over the weekend, of them presenting their projects, the what they have been doing, just to be sure that they are ready for the examinations. So it's upon the specific professors like him and I to maintain the ethic and the quality of education. But we must always acknowledge that the problem with the university education today is simply and squarely a problem of universities going to the marketplace. This is where Mahamud Mamdani, the Ugandan scholar, is right. He says the moment universities decided to go to the marketplace,
They're finished.
and the students are more important than research, and that research no longer matter, and that sitting down to mentor students in the form of apprenticeship is not what you're doing. You are counting hours because you'll be paid. That's where we went wrong. And therefore, our degrees everywhere internationally are a suspect. Not Ugandans alone. I went for my PhD at the University of Illinois. And for 2 years, I was treated like not even an undergraduate. My degrees were noticed. I went to Nairobi University, I went to Kenyatta University. They are there, but they are not recognized.
You're not recognized?
Until I
You
passed.
prove yourself.
Until the first transcript comes, the second transcript comes, then your Kenyatta University, your Nairobi University degrees begin to appear in the records of the university. Now, when we went to South Africa for a job, before you assume a job, you have to go to a certain institution South Africans have created, which is called standardization. They look at your degree and their own standards, and then they say you are not worth or you are worth. So you get a certificate of your own certificates. That means
You certify your certificate.
Yeah, your certificate. Yeah, you're given a certificate. I have a certificate that my degrees are worthy in the South African environment. So the moment you begin to become suspect, we need to be very, very careful about that. But why is this happening? I say this and stop. First, because we have moved. The purpose of a doctorate degree was to be an intellectual, to philosophize, to understand knowledge and conquer it, and therefore use it for the betterment of society. Today, we have reduced education to jobs. You want to convince President Ruto that you are a holder of a doctorate, and therefore you're going to give dignity to his cabinet when you are called doctor. That's why we are beginning to see even honorary degrees, people calling themselves doctors. You are not supposed to do that by law.
It's terrible.
By law, yes.
It's so unethical.
It's
the most
completely unethical.
illegal.
It's illegal.
And it's full in the government. It's full people
Yes,
who have calling them doctor, ambassador. The 5 names.
Yes.
And then your excellence.
And you have never ever defended a thesis.
And they're empty.
That's why when we call Dr. Ruto, William Ruto, I attended his graduation. I know Professor Ndegwa, who supervised William Ruto. I know the committee, and I have capacity in them. So that is now a doctor. If he goes with the title Dr. William Ruto, that's justified. Anybody else who have never defended a thesis, if you've never defended a thesis, don't call yourself a doctor. It's part of the certificate.
It's really bad.
Completely
All right,
unethical.
we take a short break right on that note. We'll circle back with more. We shall look at what is happening with the World Africa Day that is being celebrated or will be celebrated tomorrow. Remember, this has been also the African month. So African Union will be celebrating 60 years. We take a short break.
Your Excellency.